This video will cover the conversational portion of the CAM program. So we click the 3D button. Alright, the first thing we need to do is actually tell it the material that we are wanting to process, that we want to create a part for. So in this example, I'm going to do box 2. The whole process is exactly the same whether you do box or round. So the first thing we need to do is enter dimensions. Now it's very important when you enter the dimensions that, number one, you're as accurate as possible, especially on your radius, corner radius of square 2. And number 2 is follow the dialog here, the display here. So side 1 is the width of the tube. On our machines, that needs to be the widest point if you're doing rectangle. So if we were doing 6 by 2, this would be entered as 6. This side would be entered as 2. Alright, so I'm going to do an example of square. We'll do a 4 by 4 square. It's going to be 1/4 inch wall thickness with a radius. Ideally, the radius should be measured. It really does affect cut quality, especially on miters and copes. However, most people just double the wall thickness. I'm going to tell it that it's a 1/2 inch radius and then the length that I want my part to be. So I'm going to do 24 inches. Also, aluminum is handled differently. So at this point, from this point on, internally in the software, there's some things done differently with aluminum. And this is because the aluminum doesn't have any radius on the corner. It's sharp. And so for that, there's a different path mathematically that the software takes. So if it is aluminum, you need to select this. Everything after that will be the same as far as how you operate the software and use it. If it's not aluminum, leave this unselected. It would be steel. Choose OK. I get a model of my tube. And it tells me here that it's 4 by 4 with a 1/2 inch radius. And the wall is 1/4 inch and it's 24 inches long. Now you can start adding features or end cuts. It really doesn't matter what order you do it in, and you can always undo and then redo. So I usually do my end cuts first, although like I said, it's really not relevant. So let's say we needed a hole right in the center of this. First thing we do is select this is the icon to place a hole. Now in the holes we can have a round hole, a rectangular hole, an elliptical hole, or a triangular hole. I'm going to do a simple round hole. I want it to be 1.5 inches diameter. At this point you can select whether you want it to go through the tube, so both sides, 180 degrees from each other, or only on the side that you're defining it. I'm going to put it through the tube. Now we need to position this hole on our model. So you can measure from the left end or the right end. Now this would be the first end that's being cut. So on the machine, this would be the end where the torch is at. This is the end where the rear chuck is at. So I'm going to measure from, although it's irrelevant because I'm going to put it in the center, but I'm going to measure from the left. I'm going to place it at 12 inches because I want it in the center of my 24 inch tube. I'm going to put an angle of 0, so I want just a straight hole all the way through. Now if I put a 45 degree, it can tilt that way. If I did a minus 45, it would tilt the other way. We can do a center offset, so I can offset it 1 inch in the center. You can offset it any amount you want. You can also do a rotational, so I could rotate it 45 and it would cut it right on the corner of the material. Set this back at 0. Now, if you wanted multiple holes, you can create a pattern. You can tell it how many you want, the distance you want between them. So I want 4. I'm going to put them 2 inches apart. And I want just 1 row. Now we can do a rotational pattern. So you could have 4 of them 45 degrees. So you just answer the questions as far as what you're trying to achieve. Click apply and OK. You can see that I now have 4 holes all the way through, so we actually have 8 holes. First hole being in the center of the tube. Right. This is the miter button, so we can choose to miter either end. Again, you can pick from the left end or from the right end, from the top or the bottom, as far as how your measurements are done. You can choose an angle, or if you don't know the angle, you can enter the actual length that you need this to be, and it will define what the angle is supposed to be. So I'm going to do a 45 degree. You can rotate this also. You can rotate it 45 degrees, and then you can do an edge offset. So I click apply on that and OK. All right. Now we can do a slot. This is the slotting button, and this is the coping button. So the coping and the mitering and putting holes in are by far the most common operations. So I'm going to cope the other end. So I'm going to do from the second end. I want this to mate up to a 3.5 inch piece of pipe at a 45 degree angle. And I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. And I don't want any center offset. Apply and OK. We now have our piece. Once we're happy with our part, I recommend saving it as a step file so that we can come back later. Once we unroll it, once we exit out of this, the only way to get back to this point is to have a step file. So it's very important that you save that if it's something you think you're going to want to alter or change. All right, so call it test 2. I'm going to save it as a step file and save. Okay, so I have this model now saved. Now I'm going to unroll it. Depending on the complexity and your computer speed, it will sometimes take a little bit of time. The computer I'm using is very, very slow. And there's the path we're going to take. So this is the first cutoff, the torch, our 8 holes, 180 degrees across from each other, and our final cutoff. Alright, at this point we're going to click the CNC button to actually save the G-code. I'm going to give it a name of test 2. It will default name to the material and the measurement. You can put any name you want in here, just make sure it ends with TCS so that we can see it in the next portion of the program. And then you can pick a customer and a job file. If you wanted a new one, you could create a new one. New customer, new job, which is okay. Alright, now we can go back and create more items if we wanted to. Out of the same size tube, so let's say we have multiple parts to cut. So we're going to do something else here, and we're just going to do a simple and this from the left, 12 inch. Okay. So this tube will be pretty simple. It's just going to be a miter with 2 holes all the way through. Customer, new job, test 3. Okay. Now we want to actually generate the code to cut these out. Go to our nesting portion of the program, choose our customer, new customer, contract, new job, the material. We only have one material that we've created any parts for this particular customer and contract. It's 4x4. So there's our 2 parts. Right, one of them will be 23.64 once it's processed. The other will be 23.85. Next thing is we tell it how many lengths of the length of our stock that we have and how many the quantity we have. So this is 24-foot material, so it's 288 inches, and I've got 4. Now we can tell it how many of each one of these we want. So I want 16 of these and 32 of these. Next thing is we nest it. You can tell it where to save. It will default to the work folder for that new customer, new job, but you can save it anywhere. So I could save it in any folder that I wanted. Save it in Documents and Sample G Code. I'm going to give it a name, test 2, and save. And here we get a nesting report that tells us how many lengths we're going to use, what we're going to get out of each length, and how much waste there is, and the percentage of use of that particular length. Now, where did that go? It went into my Documents, Sample G Code, and you can see here that we have our two test programs, so test 2 and test 3. Those are individual code just to cut one of those. And then we have our nested programs in the order that they should be cut. Nest 1, Nest 2, Nest 3, Nest 4. Technically, you could cut them in any order. However, your last one, you probably don't use all the material. So you're going to have stock left. So you really should cut them in the order that they were nested.